Hey everyone, I'm Eric. Do you ever feel like economics is this whole other language? You know, you hear all these terms on the news, but it's like, what do they actually mean for us? Well, today, we're going to decode all of that. We're using a fantastic guide from Stanford's Timothy Taylor, his book, The Instant Economist, to basically build you a toolkit for a smarter life.
Right, you hear these words all the time. GDP is up, inflation's a problem, the Fed is raising interest rates. It sounds super important, but let's be honest, it can feel pretty disconnected from our day-to-day lives. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly how this stuff impacts your money, your job, and your future. So here's our game plan. First, we'll learn how to read the economy's vital signs, kind of like a doctor checking a patient. Then, we'll meet the two main players who are in charge of keeping the whole thing running smoothly. And finally, the most important part, we'll translate all this into a practical framework you can actually use to make smarter decisions.
Okay, let's dive right in. To really get a handle on the economy, you first have to know how to measure its health. Think of it like a checkup. And the three most important vital signs we're going to look for are GDP, the unemployment rate, and inflation.
First up on the chart is the big one, GDP, which stands for Gross Domestic Product. Simply put, it's the total price tag of everything a country makes and sells in a single year. It's really the broadest, most comprehensive measure of a country's economic horsepower.
A really good way to think about this is to just picture the entire U.S. economy as one giant supermarket. GDP is basically the grand total on the cash register at the end of the year. And notice we only count the final goods, like the loaf of bread you buy, not the flour that went into it. We do that to make sure we're not counting the same thing twice.
So why should you even care about this giant number? Well, because when GDP is growing, it means the whole economic pie is getting bigger for everyone. That means companies are selling more stuff, which makes them more likely to hire people, and it creates more room for us to get salary increases. A rising GDP is a huge signal of a healthy, confident economy.
Okay, our next vital sign is the unemployment rate. Now, this one's a little more specific than you might think. It's not just counting everyone who doesn't have a job. It measures the percentage of people in the labor force, and that means people who are either working or actively looking for a job who are currently unemployed.
And here's something interesting. The goal isn't actually zero unemployment. A healthy, dynamic economy always has a natural level of unemployment, usually around 4 to 5%, just from people switching between jobs. The real red flag, the number we worry about, is cyclical unemployment. That's when people lose jobs because the whole economy is slowing down.
And this is absolutely crucial for you. When unemployment is low, companies have to compete with each other to find good workers, and that gives you, the employee, way more bargaining power. It's the perfect time to negotiate for a raise, look for a better job, or even ask for better benefits.
And the third vital sign is inflation. Now, this is the one you can feel the most directly, right? Every time you go to the grocery store or fill up your car, it's just the rate at which average prices are going up, which means every dollar you have buys a little bit less than it used to. Your purchasing power is literally shrinking.
This is exactly why people call inflation the silent thief. It just quietly eats away at the value of your money. For example, if your savings account is earning 1% interest, but inflation is at 3%, you're actually losing 2% of your buying power every single year without even realizing it. Your money is effectively getting thinner.
But here's a little twist. A small amount of inflation is actually considered a good thing. Most central banks, like the Fed, they aim for a target of around 2%. Why? Well, because it encourages people and businesses to spend and invest their money today instead of just hoarding cash that's slowly losing value. And that spending is what keeps the economy humming along.
So when these vital signs start to look a little shaky, you know, if GDP is dropping or inflation is getting out of control, who actually steps in? We can think of them as the economy's doctors. And there are two main players, the government and the central bank. Each one has its own special set of tools to manage the economy. And here is the essential cheat sheet you need. The government uses what we call fiscal policy, and that's all about changing taxes and government spending. On the other hand, you have the central bank. In the US, that's the Federal Reserve, and they use monetary policy, with their main tool being interest rates.
Fiscal policy is pretty straightforward. You can think of it just like the pedals in a car. If the economy is sluggish and needs a boost, the government can hit the gas by cutting taxes or spending more on things like new roads and bridges. And if the economy is overheating, they can tap the brakes by raising taxes or cutting back on spending.
Now, monetary policy is a bit more indirect. Picture the central bank as having control over the main faucet for all the money in the country. By raising or lowering interest rates, they make it either more expensive or cheaper for all of us to borrow money. They're basically turning the flow of money up or down.
So let's see how that actually works in practice. Let's say inflation is running way too high. The central bank raises interest rates. Suddenly, mortgages, car loans, and business loans all get more expensive. What happens? Well, people and companies borrow less and they spend less. This drop in demand helps cool the whole economy down, which takes the pressure off of prices. It's a really powerful chain reaction.
Okay, so we've covered the key numbers and the people who pull the levers. Now we get to the most important part. How can you actually use this knowledge? This is where we turn these big, abstract ideas into a practical toolkit for your own financial life. Let's play out a real-world scenario. Imagine you just got an unexpected bonus from work. Awesome. At the same time, you keep hearing on the news that GDP growth is slowing and interest rates are going up. Before, that might have just been background noise. But now you can start to think like an economist.
You're now equipped to ask much smarter questions. For example, how are higher interest rates going to affect the profits of the companies I'm looking to invest in? What does a slowing economy usually mean for the stock market? Is this the right time to be taking on more risk, or should I maybe look at some more stable assets? See, it gives you a framework for a much more strategic decision.
Let's try another one that's super relevant for all of us right now. Everyone is talking about switching careers to get into the AI industry. But how do you evaluate a move like that beyond just the hype? You can use an economic lens. You can start asking questions like, is the AI industry growing a lot faster than the overall GDP? You could look into whether the government is using its fiscal policy, like tax breaks, to boost that sector. The fundamental question becomes, am I trying to steer my career into a powerful economic tailwind, or am I about to sail right into a headwind? It is a much more solid way to plan your future.
So what's the bottom line here? It really all comes down to a simple but powerful toolkit. You now know how to read the 3 vital signs of the economy. You understand the 2 main levers of control used to manage it. And most importantly, you have a brand new lens you can apply to your investments, your career, and even your daily spending choices.
Seriously, think of this as a new pair of glasses for seeing the economic forces that are shaping our world all the time. From now on, you won't just hear the news, you'll understand the why behind it. If you found this explainer helpful, it would be awesome if you could like, subscribe, and share. And we really want to know what you want to learn about next, so let us know in the comments what book you'd like us to break down. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.